And
So,
I'll
so what do you want to know?
I'm curious as to what brought you to Fells Point, and
Yeah.
then tell your story about how you found the building and what
Mhm.
happened after that. Just tell
Okay.
your story.
Okay. I really didn't know much about Fells Point because even though my husband was a doctor at Hopkins, we called this, what did we call it, the waterfront, and it wasn't called Fells Point. It was just right down at the foot, we called it the foot of Broadway, that's what it was. And so I hadn't come down here much, but I had heard that some architects had been very, very interested in old houses down here. So my brother, who lived in New York, wanted to come down and see some old houses. And I said, well, we better go to Fells Point. And then we tried, and it was hard to get here, and nobody knew Fells Point. And we came, and we found it was on the waterfront, and we liked it very much, although it looked almost deserted. Very, very few cars there, very few people. It was pretty much deserted. And so we saw this house we liked very much. It was a fine-looking house from the outside. And the little bar next door said, just go in, it's vacant. And so we did, and we found that it was in very original condition, which really surprised us because it hadn't been ruined at all. I guess mainly because whoever had it at that time didn't have the money to do it. That's about why it was that way, I'm sure. So we looked into the whole story. The people next door said they thought it was for sale. We finally found the real estate office, a little office off Broadway. And, they said, yes, it's for sale. And it turned out it was for sale at such a low price that we were sort of astounded. And so right away, we put some money down and said, we want it. And then we were so excited. My brother spent the weekend. We were so excited about what had happened that we couldn't stand it. We went down here again, walking along the waterfront. And this man who sort of looked as if he lived here, he was kind of in work clothes. I said, we just bought that house over there. I couldn't contain myself. And he said, oh yes, that's where they're going to put the expressway. I think they're going to take out 3 blocks. So that was kind of, a pretty quick, forget it. And my brother said, well, we can't fight City Hall. This is ridiculous. It was all too good to be true, and so forth and so on. So we went back to New York. And then the next day I came back and I went up in the house and spent some time. The second floor has got a wonderful room, which just must have the best proportions. Something that really gets you because it's happened to a lot of people, not just me. And I thought, when I thought of Europe and all the old places there that go way, way back, and here we are with the few things we have, just destroying them all. So I thought, well, I'm just going to see what I can do. So I called an architect who had a house, an apartment right on the harbor, further over that way. One of the few people that even liked the harbor. Everybody thought it was a sort of dirty, unattractive place to be. Forget it. You can't fix it. So I called him and I said, what would you do if you want to save Fells Point? He'd say, I'd say it's about 5 years too late. I really don't think that you can do it now. People have given it up, and the city, the county, the federal government are all in favor of it. I'm sure you knew that the federal government paid 90% of the cost of the expressway. I mean, you knew that.
I did.
Whoever you are. And so that was a big incentive to the people in the city. They were thrilled to get a new road paid for mostly by the federal government. So so he said, no, there's nothing you can do, forget it. I said, look, just tell me what you would do if you definitely want to do something. No matter how foolish it was or how late it was, what would you do? He said, well, I guess you could call a meeting of CHAP, which was the, let's see, what does it stand for? It's the Architectural Preservation part of the city, but it's very small. I mean, it's backed by the city, but it's not. It doesn't have a lot of support. So he said, I'll get the people that are working on the road, and I'll get people who are against it, and we'll just see what we can do. So we did. And some of the, yeah, I can have some notes here.
Okay, sure.
The historic, little historic group there. It's called CHAP, and it's the part of the city that's interested in historic preservation. And so there I met the man who was the president of the Baltimore Heritage, which is another historic organization with people who care about old houses and try to do their best to help them restore them and all the rest of it. So he, I had a long talk with him. But first I talked to everybody. I said, this place has got to be saved. And of course, a lot of the people were people who were working on doing it. And everybody who was working on it wanted it, of course. So it was, you know, a combination of lots of different things going on. So anyway, Aaron Bullock said, join Baltimore Heritage, I'll put you on the board, and I'll give you the chance to have an expressway committee. So I said, good, we'll do that. So that's what I did. That was the first thing. And I said to Bo Kelly, see, there's somebody who's helping us do something. And he said, it's too late. And he really was very enthusiastic about doing something. He just said it's too late. And but I kept after him too, after we got a committee going and some people joining us and all the rest of it. And he said, I think it would be a good idea to have a really big meeting for architects all over the city, people who were interested in preservation. At the, there's a factory there, what do they call it? It's a factory that has spices, factory, McCormick, you know, McCormick building. And that was right on the waterfront, so it was a good place to have it.
Was that here in Fells Point?
No, it's
Across the water.
further down that way, but it's right on the water.
Okay.
But it is further than, it's a little bit, I'd say probably, well, it's beyond Fells Point, but it's right on the waterfront. So we did that, and it was a big meeting place, and it was quite full. And a lot of architects were very interested in the whole thing. So that was a big plus, to have that kind of
But what year was
exposure. That was in '96. No, yeah. Wait a minute. No, it was in '66. 1966, because when we bought this house was in
I was 11.
'65.
I was 11.
Yeah, why weren't you down here helping, huh?
Well, I played my first professional gig when I was 11. I had an actual steady performing job
Good,
playing accordion when I was 11.
good. But you weren't anywhere near Fells Point.
No, I was Springfield, Illinois.
Oh, you weren't even in Baltimore.
No.
Oh, we're Midwesterners.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, then this is sort of hard to take.
Oh, this is great.
We're sons of the soil.
But not near any waterfront.
No.
No. Well, I've always been crazy about a waterfront, no matter what it was, any old dump, just to have water there. And not many people, until lately, felt that way at all.
I've always felt that
And they're
way.
wondering, what in hell are you doing trying to save this grubby waterfront?
Now, you were in New York when you came down here and bought this place? Or
No,
where-
I grew up in Pittsburgh, and when I was about, 19 actually, I left Pittsburgh to marry my second cousin who lived here.
So then you came, because you had mentioned New York and I got confused. So your husband, was he involved in this too, or was?
He was very busy as a doctor at Hopkins, but you see, he was close by, and he was interested that I was doing it. I think he was interested that I got in so deeply.
Well, what was the reputation of the area at the time that you came down here? Had you heard anything about what was?
No,
what
I
was it
hadn't
like
heard anything
then?
about it until I came down, and then I heard the councilmen told their constituents, you're so lucky the city wants to buy your houses because you're living in a slum. And they told everybody, you're just in a slum. You're in a slum, that's what it is. Now, some of the people really still owned houses, but a lot of them were vacant. And it was sort of like a place for ships to come in, and sometimes people who were on the ships to spend the night, sort of, they had some places where they could stay overnight, that kind of thing, or a few days. And so that's really what it was.
Was it busy, or was it just pretty dead?
You would hardly see any cars here. Now, when parking has gotten to be one of the biggest problems we have, there really were hardly any cars at all.
Okay, well, go back into your story where you had
Yeah,
the
where
meeting
was
with the
I?
architects, I think, at
Yeah.
McCormick.
Yeah, and they were very enthusiastic. And then what Bo Kelly did, and he can't even remember all that. he made a great design of what the bridge across the inner harbor. Actually, where's this picture I can show you? Actually, the inner harbor was where the expressway was going to go. And you see, the inner harbor is one that always had sort of shallow wharfage. And so the big ships used at one time really came in here more than in there because that was sort of shallow. So they were going to put this expressway right across the inner harbor, cut Federal Hill in half. Do you know where Federal Hill is?
Mhm.
Have you ever been there?
Yeah.
Well, you can see what it would be cutting it in half. Can you picture that? And I said, when I heard they were going to do that, I said, cutting it in half? Why would you do anything like that? Oh, there'll be room on either side. For what?
Show the picture toward the
Well,
camera.
she's gonna let me scan it,
Oh, good enough.
so I'll have a copy of it.
And so then, this was going to be completely right around the whole inner harbor, so there would have been no inner harbor, which people really like. I mean, you know, they made a big thing out of it.
Mm-hmm.
They would never have existed, because this would all have been built out and be 3 tiers, some places, of cars.
Yeah, I mean, it's that way, south of the harbor now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Mhm. So that was the problem, and so everything that we tried to do was hard to do because the city, the state, and the federal government were all strongly behind this plan, and they really wanted it in a big way. So we didn't have anybody really important on our side. We had a lot of people that thought it was a good idea, but not a whole lot of power in any of it. So we had meetings, we had people gathering down at the main city hall and having meetings down there, having people coming from different parts of the city and so forth. And we sort of chugged along, and finally I had this person that got interested and wanted to meet me and say, let's get together and let's start a whole kind of preservation society to see what we can do. His name was Tom Ward. He was the only member of the city council who voted against it. He later became a lawyer, but then he said he wanted to really help. So I guess without him, we couldn't have done it, because he knew a lot of the background that we were totally ignorant of as far as where we could get help, you know. And so he joined, and we formed the society. In one of the houses that, in the meantime, my brother and I had bought to try to save people from turning it over to the city. And then I talked to my friends, I'd say, you have to buy houses down in Fells Point. They're very cheap, and that's the only way we can save the city. And I said, our friendship depends on it. They said, that's a good way to lose friends. Actually, in the end, I only got 3. Because I felt the more people in the houses are very cheap, the more people bought the houses, the better off we'd be.
How much would a house go for?
I'll tell you what we paid for that little house that we finally bought. $1,200.
They went down from there, because didn't the city sell them for $1 after they?
No, not here they didn't.
Oh.
That was another part of the city where
Oh.
they sold them for $1. Here what they did when it finally came to that, after we had one, which took 11 years, they let you buy them, but then you had to guarantee you were going to restore them. And they let you buy them at a reasonable, very reasonable price. I don't know, 50, 30, whatever, that kind of thing. But everybody had to then restore it the best way that it could be done. So that's what happened then. But of course, that was after the whole thing was saved, which was a bigger surprise to me than anybody else.
So before it was saved, the property was just dirt cheap. Did the property go up after it was saved?
Oh yeah, sure. But then the city had taken over so much of it that a lot of it was worse than before the city took it over, because they would, for instance, turn off the heat. Everything would be ruined. Roofs would be leaking, and it needed, like, a lot of the place needed more work than they did even before the city took it over. But you see, that was 11 years of vacant houses, and that was really bad.
Was there one person in this area that just bought up, had the foresight to buy up everything? No person, huh?
Just me and my brother. And we didn't do nearly what he looked at it after and said, we should have, instead of trying to get people to buy it, we should have
How many
done it.
places did you buy? Just a couple places, or?
In the end, I think he and I had probably about, maybe 10.
Oh. Now that finished me.
It wasn't anything.
I know, but now.
Yeah, but it wasn't anything, and actually, I sold them as I went along. And one person I sold this house to on Thames Street for very little. And then the hotel came in and bought the Admiral Fell Inn, bought the whole corner, and then bought this. And he hadn't done anything to the house, and I'd sold it to him for something, I don't know, 35, 40,000. He got something like 200,000 for it without doing anything.
Mm.
So this was not a money-making proposition that I was into, although, as you say, it certainly could have been. But so it went on, and we had we had a meeting at the city hall where the people who lived here and the people who were trying to save it. You see, I think I've got something here that I thought was sort of funny. Jim Dills wrote. It was about the meeting. I liked it because what he said about me. At about this time, Ms. Fisher and the Preservationists helped to sponsor a meeting with architects and highway engineers, which resulted in architect Archibald Rogers. This is part of the story I want to tell you too. Set up the design concept team. Probably you've heard about that. That was the design concept team that was supposed to come and weave the expressway in a very acceptable way through the city, which of course isn't possible. So I mean, that was sort of a silly thing, but that's what he was trying to get an architectural setup group to do it.
Did you know that the 83 Jones Falls there is an example in most all engineering and architectural schools as what not to do when building a road? It really is. I mean, it's a real big, things banked wrong, you don't do this, no drainage, all kinds of stuff.
See, we got this sort of too from all the other, I'm glad you brought that point up, because we got that a lot from the other towns that had already decided to do this and let them go through. They were so upset with what it did to their city, and the part of their city that was taken. Philadelphia was one. I heard that out in San Francisco they'd stopped a road in full swing that was going to, whether it was part of this or not, I don't know, but they
San
stopped
Francisco's that way. I mean, if they don't like some type of law, the people like sit in mass in thousands and
That's
just not do this. People really care about that city.
That's good. I know they do.
They really do.
I've got a granddaughter that lives there and really loves it. So this was something that they went ahead and put a lot of money into to get this road woven into the city so people wouldn't object. But of course people are always going to object because when they weave this road in, they've got the road and it's taking out a lot of other things and it's a big one. So that was something that people didn't like, and of course we were trying to do our best to get all the information we could about from other cities and find out how badly they'd fared in other cities. And so let's see, what's the next thing? Oh, then Tom Ward said, after we'd worked on this thing for a few years, he said, we've got to sue the city. We've got to sue the federal government. Not just the city, we're going to sue the federal government. So a few of the people who lived here, in fact, 2 women really, at the meetings we had at City Hall, had come up to us afterwards and said, what can we do, because we do like the place and we'd like to save it. The other people just felt they believed that they should get out, it was a slum, They really liked it. So one of the women, who'd been a school teacher, said she would be the principal in suing the federal government.
Who was she?
I was afraid you'd ask that.
Oh. It's probably out there.
She still lives here. I'll get it in for her.
Okay.
And
might be in that
Eleanor was her first name, and she was married to a
Roosevelt?
man who lived here.
Just a joke.
She
You said
sounded like
Eleanor
she
Roosevelt,
was good
right?
enough to do that. Yeah. Anyway, so I'll just tell you what happened here at the meeting. Meanwhile, former second district councilman Tom Ward, he was the one that was helping me, as chairman of the transportation committee, had been hauling councilmen around to other cities to look at mass transit systems, and had been conducting what he referred to as guerrilla campaign against the expressway here. At home, introduced an ordinance with the backing of the preservationists. It would have shifted the condemnation line in Fells Point slightly to save the valuable block of building. Well, that's the thing that didn't work, so I don't need to go into it, but he was trying to move the road just a little bit so that it would be less destructive of the old buildings. It was really a class confrontation, working class Poles from Fells Point against WASP preservationists with strange accents from the suburbs. Neither group distinguished itself. The preservationists read desperate telegrams from Garden Club, save Fells Point. The residents, egged on by their councilman, heckled them at every opportunity. It was a wild meeting, no question about it. But here's the way he writes it. At last, Mrs. Fisher stood up. I love this. Amid the catcalls, and with great dignity, said that if she were a resident of Fells Point, she would wonder why so many people were so interested in the neighborhood. It must be very special, she said. Which is true. But the meetings really were funny for that reason, and they didn't really get us anywhere. We were still, headed for the end. And so when we did this to sue the federal government, Eleanor Lukowski was her name, and they lived here. And her mother-in-law lived here, and her mother-in-law's family lived here. It was all very much into the Fells Point thing. They'd come from abroad years, generations ago. And so, we never actually had to do it, but we had it pending the whole time. And whoever was the head of the roads thing in the federal government, and I can't think of his name, but I'll get it for you too. She was against him, Eleanor Lukowski, versus this. It was very good. It looked good to us. And so that was a big part of what we wanted to do, was to try to stop it. Then we decided we'd have to get a lawyer that didn't mind fighting the city, and that was hard. But we finally did, and we got a very good lawyer who helped us a great deal in helping us how to, do the things and have enough people heard so that there were enough that it got to be a bigger and bigger group that was opposed to the road. And I guess part of this will give you an idea of what we felt. This was for our 30th anniversary. And Mayor Thomas D'Alessandro was very much in favor of the road, because it would have been a free road for the city, is the way people looked at it. We named our group the Federal Hill and Fells Point, because Federal Hill was very much affected too, so we got them into the whole society. So it's made up of both groups.
Now, was Federal Hill in better shape at that time than Fells Point was?
A few people had started restoring houses there. That's how it was ahead of us there. Nobody had tried to do it in Fells Point. But in Federal Hill, there was a street where a few people had tried to restore and were restoring old houses. So that's why they could help us too, because there was nobody down here that was doing it. Nobody. So that was a plus to combine the two. And then one of the people that had joined our club, our society, who was very interested in it, decided, and I got to be president because Tom Ward said, you've got to run it. Somebody's got to you know, make it work. So I did, and then we got people to come and join it and see how many people we could get that would really be interested. And this one man who was very interested and decided that we would have to have a big fair here and show people what Fells Point was all about. And I said, I was president, we can't. We're trying to do everything we can. We're having to go over all these houses. We're trying to, you know, write them all up. We have very few people. We can't have this big. The fair is not the right word. What's the right word? Not bizarre. You know, what's the right word?
Was it like a street or like
yeah, street thing.
open house street thing?
A street thing. Street.
Yeah.
I'll say a fair, but I think it's a better name. Anyway, he was all set to do it, and he just overrun me. Luckily, and we started with the first fair about the first year we'd been having the group, and it just gave us a lot of publicity. A lot, because so many people came. Had it right on the waterfront. Had beer. Had tables for people to buy things.
Festival?
Festival, thank you. Of course that was first. And it was a Fells Point Festival, and it's been going ever since. It still goes every year. That's the way, actually, we have been able to survive. Because we've had enough money to make our group work. So that was a big help. When the group came to weave the expressway through the city well, we worked with them, but of course we were totally against the whole thing, and there wasn't any sort of, and they spent so much money on that thing that it seemed almost ridiculous. But in a way, it got us into all of the different people all across the city who hadn't really worked against it, but were then very convinced to do it. Because then they saw exactly what was going to happen where they were. So it was really a big help to do that, and it gave us a lot more backing. So time went on, and we had our lawsuit against the federal government. And the way we did it against the federal government for destroying a historic area without, and actually there was a kind of a law, but nobody had paid much attention to it, that the historic areas should not be destroyed. But it had never been really tried, and that was what our suit was about. That they were putting a road through an historic area without trying to save the area.
Now, was this, at some point, Fells Point was declared a historic district? Was this about the
Yeah.
same time?
That happened when, gee, I wish I had that material at the hand. That happened before we actually had, all we knew was we wanted to save the area, but we hadn't gotten into any real system to do it. I guess it was the whole country had in Congress a bill had come up where they could save historic areas if they were considered historic enough with all the work and so forth to find out if they were worth it. And this was going to be over the entire country. And they had to pass this to show they were an historic area that should be saved. So that's what happened. We got in almost on the first. We heard about it, we heard about the bill, and we got, and what we had to do was to go out and find and describe all these historic houses in the area so that we would qualify. And so that way we had that behind us, which of course really had no meaning because it had never been tried.
Mm-hmm.
We used that in the suit against that they would be willing to destroy an historic area that should have been protected. So that you know, I'm kind of going backwards. Okay. If I'd had more time when you called me, I would have had this in much better order. I really wouldn't, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I mean, if
So
we,
maybe-
if it really turns out that we want to do it again, we can do it again at some point.
If you think it should, and I
Yeah.
will have a much more sort of ordered
But I can
scheme of
edit
things.
this, I can change the order.
Yes, I guess you can, yeah. I didn't know once you talked into a place whether it's easy to change it or
It's
not.
easy to change. In
Okay.
fact, I would probably, take, just important clips. I wouldn't take the whole thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
No,
you
we
end
wouldn't,
up
I know
with,
you
you
cut
know,
a lot
maybe
out because
5
it's
or
just
10
rambling
minutes
on,
of
but,
time.
yeah, right,
And I can reorder it.
yeah. Oh, well, that'll be fine.
She does that with my life, just edits me down into like 5 or 6 minutes.
You know, you're really lucky. Do you ever realize how lucky you are?
That's what I feel when
Yeah, gotta feel lucky when that happens.
I feel real lucky.
Well, you probably are. So then, how did I put it here? I might as well. We were lucky to get a good lawyer and his firm to work with us regardless of whether they were doing anything against the city or not. They did help us an awful lot. And we were able to restore some houses and work with the area and so forth. But we still hadn't beaten the road thing. It was still hanging there. And then one of the members of our group called me up and said, the city council is going to rescind the order to destroy Fells Point. This is 11 years. So I told everybody, but only he and I were the ones that went to the meeting and heard them pass it, and then went to a bar across from the city hall. And that
No, I knew that.
was a good feeling.
That's something I did. That's
Now
one thing
you're-
we
now
have
you're
in
with
common.
me.
I've never really saved anything. I've saved a few squirrels and chipmunks and stuff, but I haven't done the bar thing.
So with that drink, we sort of sealed the future, we thought, of Fells Point. Of course, there's, a long time to do all that, but we felt that it had finally come to pass. And I really was, many times, thought it was impossible. Because something that has been so backed up by the whole system, and even the federal government giving 90% money, it's not easy to get a whole group of know-nothings to say, stop.
Yeah.
But I think they had done it in other places, but we didn't hear about it, doing it so much as we had to really stop the whole thing, and then they had to find another way to do it. And they finally did. And they spent, I guess, wasted an awful lot of money on that design concept team.
Excuse me a second, I'm going outside.
And then I ended this up by saying, gradually, the realization came that time itself was an ally. The estimated cost of the Baltimore Expressway system was mounting constantly, which it was, getting more and more expensive as time went on to build the thing. So whatever the cost was going to be, the city was going to have to do its share of it, and it was going to be tough. And citizens in other cities were opposing similar interstate highways planned through the hearts of their communities, San Francisco and so forth. It is difficult to say which of the many actions taken against the road caused a change in plans, and it was hard. So many things kind of came together in the end, Most likely it was a combination of all of them. In any event, 11 years after its passage, the City Council rescinded the condemnation ordinance and the expressways were rerouted around the inner harbor. The harbor, not the inner harbor, instead of through it. The results are there for everyone to see, and the Harbor Place has become an example to other cities.
Can you talk just real quickly about the changes that you've seen in Fells Point since then?
They have been overwhelming. No question about it. They've just been overwhelming. I suppose because we worked so hard to do something that was hard to do, that I don't think we anticipated the amount of building and rushing to be in Fells Point would occur. We were even surprised that so many people wanted the houses because, there are a lot of bars around and a lot of people, certainly my husband's family and people that live in the county, why are you spending so much time down in Fells Point in the city? That's terrible. You know, they just didn't think the city was a place to spend your time. There hadn't kind of been a good reason to, you know? And so there was always that too, that you had to feel that only the people that really cared about it and had worked for it and and liked the waterfront. But it just began to have people coming down all the time, and it just grew and grew. And it was sort of amazing to me how much money people were putting into the houses down here, and how much they wanted to be here, and how much people want to be here anyway. How did you happen to get here?
We liked it. I mean,
Yeah,
we
I know,
liked
but
the
I
city
mean,
as well
yes,
as
I know, but when you came here, how did you get into here? What did you hear about it? How did you want to come here? You came to a city you didn't know.
we wanted to live in the city.
Yeah,
We had a suburban realtor who didn't really know her way around in Fells Point that much.
I'm sure.
You know, she showed us a few places in Fells Point, Canton, and Federal Hill. And Fells Point was a better buy in terms of price than, you know, the same amount of space in Federal Hill. And that was one thing. And we liked the fact it was near the water. I mean, Federal Hill is separated, you know.
Well, it's part of Federal Hill, and I think that's why it's expensive there. It's right over the water. I mean, you can see it, the water.
Yeah, but you can't walk out your door and be there in a block.
No, and I really would never have chosen Federal Hill because it's so much in the city. This is so removed. And I kept telling everybody when the family would always say, "What are you doing down there in the city?" I said, "Oh, I have an old car. I don't even lock my car." And ever since I've come down here, how many years? 30 years. I have never locked my car in Fells Point. I've made up my mind I wasn't going to do it. Just as if I were at home or something. And the only time I had any problem was when there was a drunk in the back seat. And I just said, you know, I want you to get out. He got out, and that was it. And all that time. I did when I had my Jeep down here. I had some boys that broke the window, but they didn't do anything. I mean, I just wanted people to know it was a very safe place. And I think for a city, it's amazingly safe. I never felt that way about Federal Hill because it was so much in the city, so much a part of the city. Do you know what I mean? You're sort of just in the city. This is really removed because it's where it is. So I just felt that way about it. You don't need to make that public.
If you had a dream, if you could set the direction of what Fells Point's going to be like in the future, what would you do with it?
I would protect the waterfront in any way that was feasible and acceptable that I could, and try to keep people from destroying it by using the waterfront because everybody wanted to be there. Now, I think it's an impossibility. I honestly do. You see this here. I don't think this is going to last. The meetings that I went to here in the city pier, 5 big companies had come, except for Struver Brothers, from all over the country to just get that place. Water front that, I mean, I don't know why people used to hate it, but now they have to have it. So that's why it's now another thing entirely to save it from that, and whether that's going to be possible.
Are you going to lead the charge?
I don't think I could. I thought of a lot of things that I could do, and one of them was to try to get people to join me and buy this place right here, which is the most vulnerable place in the world. If you go out there and look, you can see
The pier?
the pier and what the pier means and the other part of the pier. The pier actually goes all the way around here. And there's another entrance to it over there. And there's a building there. And there's a lot of waterfront. This is the most kind of desirable place. This can go off of this thing.
As long as I'm here, can you tell us where we are, just, you know, for the context of the camera? And I'm going to take the camera out in the patio real quick before I run out of this tape and, you know,
Okay.
kind of take
Okay.
a quick look around.
So you want me to say this is on Fell Street?
Yeah, and then this,
Fell Street.
what's the history of this house? How did you come to own it? How old is it?
I had seen this house and I liked it very much, and I found out it belonged to a tugboat not a owner, tugboat hand, and he'd had it for a long time. And he wanted to sell it because he's on the water all the time. He didn't want to be on the water anymore. So eventually he sold it to me. And then I found it was almost all original, except for this third floor. They had, you know how often they do, they take the roof, the pitched roof off, and give you, which they gave us this, which was wonderful, because this is the part I like best. That part was something that kept it from being totally original. That was probably about 100 years ago, so I didn't want to lose this top floor. And it was built by the shipbuilder, who built it after he bought the 2 little houses next door. And then this was a vacant lot, and that's where he put his good-sized building, which is kind of big for Fells Point, too, this size house. And then he had his shipyard right along this coast, as far as I know, and I think he did.
Keep an eye on the workers.
Okay, I'm gonna take the camera off the tripod and take it out on the balcony.
How about this one?